Hello, sportsmen. You know, a few weeks ago we did a program leading up to the opening of Michigan's firearm deer season. Well, now we're doing a show leading up to a program that has been a Michigan tradition since Morton F. started Big Buck Night back in the 1950s. This is our own Big Buck Night, and that's coming up next week. In preparation for that, Greg Abbas is going to demonstrate deer calling and deer rattling, two techniques some hunters use to get their trophy buck. So you stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost with a warm-up for next week's Big Buck Night. November is the prime month when the big bucks chase the does. It's mating season, and the bucks communicate by grunting. Greg Abbas knows how to talk the language of the deer.
There's different ways to go about grunting. This is a tube call. This is what we consider to be a rutting buck call, and most people are familiar with this. It's been on the market a long time. These have different settings in them. Most of them will have a buck, doe, and fawn setting in there, and you can adjust the reeds on these. These tube calls tend to be loud at times and a little deep. They tend to work better during peak rut when the deer themselves are a little louder. And it sounds like this. Now there's another type of call on the market that you're just starting to hear about, just starting to read about, and it's a social type call, such as the bow grunter right here. Now this call, as you can hear, is a little more softer and it's a little more subtle. The difference between a social call and a rutting buck call is social works throughout the whole year. You get out in your stand early October and you hear them deer communicating, and it's so soft and subtle. And they're not communicating because they're in the rut, it's because they're social and they have a need to communicate no matter how old they get. Now this call here fits down at my waist and it comes all the way up to my collar. Leaves my hands free so I could have them on the bow or hold up the gun, which to me is very important. This call also has different settings on it. You have a fawn, doe, buck, and dominant buck by moving this O-ring. I consider there to be two major calls that I'm going to use during the year. I know deer make a lot of communications, and there's only two that I consider to be really significant. That's a doe setting and a young buck setting. Now the doe is the one I use 90% of the time. She is not a threat, meaning she's never going to scare a deer away. If you use a dominant buck setting on any call, you could scare away lesser deer in the area, because you just have to think of yourself. Would I rather go out on a date with a pretty girl, or would I rather get in a fight with a big guy? Most of us know the answer to that one. I'd rather go out on that date. Therefore, the doe is a safe way to go. And that sounds like this. Now during peak rut, I'll change this call over to a young buck setting, because now I may want to challenge another buck in the area. If there is a bigger buck, he may hear that along with my rattling and really get him upset, fired up, and come in looking for battle. And that sounds like this. It's a little deeper. Now you may notice I also have the call pointing behind me. What I'm doing is throwing the voice, so to speak, behind me. I want that deer to think the sound he hears is beyond my tree stand or my ground blind, so he'll walk through me getting to that sound. Probably one of the most common mistakes that hunters make is by pointing the call at the deer, you're projecting your sound at him. He's expecting to see that deer 50 yards in front of you. And when he don't see it, he's going to get more nervous and circle and probably get frightened. Now, as soon as daylight comes, I should start calling. What I'm going to want to do is hit some just soft grunts at first in case that deer's close by. Then get gradually louder if you don't see a deer. Normally I'm going to give 3 short grunts and wait 15-20 minutes and wait for the deer to come in. Don't expect him to come in grunting back at you or answering back like a turkey does. He's more or less just going to sneak in. He may circle around your stand trying to wind you to make sure that that is a deer that he's hearing. Now you have these short grunts, and also during peak rut you may want to throw in what's called a tending grunt. That's when the buck's with the doe and he's asking her, "Are you ready?" And it sounds like this. So a typical sequence during peak rut, I would throw in a couple short grunts, which are trail grunts, and your longer tending grunts. And just wait 15-20 minutes, and hopefully something's going to come in for you. Once Amir's focusing on your stand, don't grunt anymore. He's acknowledged you, and he's telling you, I'll be there in a minute. Now, his minute may take an hour, but he's acknowledged you. Once he starts coming in, let him come. I wouldn't grunt anymore unless he's going to deviate off course and possibly not give you that shot. Once he starts to deviate a little bit or look the other way, I may grunt again to reinforce it that this deer is still here. But if you don't need to call, don't call, because you can't carry on a conversation with the deer. And as he gets closer, I'm not going to grunt at all. I happen to be playing with this buck a little bit. I knew I wasn't going to harvest him, but you could see the effectiveness of a grunt call.
Like Greg says, when you imitate a deer grunt, do not expect the deer to answer back. Grunting is not a communication that gets an answer, but it can get a response. Greg pulled this buck into 20 yards from his blind, and to stop him for a moment, he gave a single short grunt.
Well, rattling can be very effective if used properly. I know everybody's seen on TV and the videos where these antlers are crashed together and all these bucks come running from different directions, so you go out and get yourself a set of rattling antlers and you try it, and it's like, man, where's all the deer? Well, the thing is, in Michigan here, we have a higher doe to buck ratio. Now, some counties in Michigan here may have that population where they need to fight for that doe, but most of the time what's more effective for me is just tickling the tines rather than that big knockdown, drag down fight. This is what's more common in Michigan, and you'll still attract the deer. Now I'll throw in some young buck grunts along with this, make it sound more realistic, and they're just playing. This sequence is going to last about a minute, then I'll wait 15-20 minutes before I repeat the process again and wait for them deer to come in. Secondly, you see a lot of large racks when you rattle, or you go to the store, you buy large racks. It's more effective to take a rack that's natural to your area. If you're using a big rack and there's small deer in the area, you may end up scaring deer away. So it's safer to just take a deer that you harvested in the past and use that rack and tickle the tines a little bit, because that's what's more natural to your area.
Very often you'll see smaller bucks spar, even late in the season. That's why you use small antlers and imitate the sparring if the bucks in your area are small and you don't want to scare them off. It's the sound of big antlers clashing that scares small bucks, because big dominant bucks don't spar, they fight. While dominant bucks fight over a doe in heat, another buck who hears the battle might come in to steal the waiting doe. Well, those battles are still going on in the woods between the big bucks. The last of the does are coming into heat for the last time, and breeding activity is less available to the dominant bucks, so hey, the competition is still there in December. But speaking of competition, deer hunting, well, it's really not a competition, but we do have Big Buck Night coming up next week. Now, we saw a lot of bucks down at the colossal buck pole at Mill Creek Sports in Dexter on the second night of the season, but believe it or not, most of these bucks are too small to qualify for Big Buck Night. But let's take a look at a few anyway. Tell me about it. Come on in here.
How you doing?
Good. What's your name?
Dan Bartram,
And Dan, where are you from?
Westland.
And what are you doing way over here?
Just showing off the biggest one I ever got.
Okay, so that's a 10-point.
Yeah.
And you got it where?
Livingston County. We'll just leave it at that. Somewhere out that way.
Somewhere out there.
Yeah.
So you've gotten other bucks?
Yeah, just 4 pointers off the same property, 2 of them. One last year and one the year before.
Wow.
This is the biggest one here.
Well, congratulations on that one, Dan. Let's go down here. I want to see this one. Excuse me. This we got a 6-point, 5-point, 6-point, but it's a fairly wide one here. We got one on the end that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoa! Who got this one?
I got the second one.
The second one? Well, this one's yours? You two related at all?
No.
Okay. Well, we'll take yours first, ma'am. What's your name?
Betty Gantner.
Well, Betty, tell us about look at this, Johnny. This is a 1, 2, 3. That's an 8-point, huh?
Yep,
8-point.
got it on our dairy farm,
Huh.
north of Saline.
So what's the deal? You
I-
left a little extra corn out there for him, or what?
No. He came into me at the ponds. We have some ponds, and he was following a doe, and he just came the wrong way.
How big is your dairy farm?
We milk about 100 cows.
Oh, are the cows all inside all the time?
No, not all the time.
So they're outside? Does the cows being around have any effect on the deer?
No, not really. They eat their share of corn before the cows get it.
Oh, that's great. An 8-point
Thank you.
for you. And you are home?
I hunt out of Washington County.
Well, what's your name?
Bill.
Bill.
Fortman. Yep.
Bill who?
Fortman.
Fortman.
Yep.
And this is a, how many points? Right on the end here,
10,
John.
11.
11
It
points.
ain't been decided yet.
The scoring of that buck has not been decided yet, but unfortunately, as a Southern Michigan buck, it's going to be too small for next week's Big Buck Night, which is, by the way, Thursday night, 8 p.m., 1 hour live from the studios of Channel 56 in Detroit. Now, if you got a big buck that you think qualifies for Big Buck Night, or you know somebody who got a big buck, here are 3 ways that we score the racks. Now, these are 3 different ways, and a buck can qualify any one of these 3 ways to receive an MSDA hunting award. And of course, there's the point system. And we're looking for 10 antler points that are at least 1 inch long. Now, this has 10 points here, so it qualifies, but you don't need 10 antler points to get an award. There is another way to qualify. If your rack is extremely wide, and by extremely wide, we call that 18 inches maximum outside spread, any way that you can measure it, 18-inch outside spread will get you an MSDA hunting award no matter how many points the rack has. Plus, there's one more way to qualify. That's if any antler tine is at least 10 inches long. Now, this rack doesn't have any that would qualify, but if you even have a spike buck or a 4-point, 6-point that has tines 10 inches long, you can get an MSDA hunting award. Now, for Big Buck Night, the minimums are going to be quite a bit larger, except we are looking for buck racks from all over the state. So if you got a buck from the UP or from the Northern Lower Peninsula, you don't have to have the monstrous rack like you're going to have for the southern counties. So contact us if you got a trophy. Even if you don't make Big Buck Night, we can get you an MSDA hunting award, a chance to come to our banquet to tell your story on stage. But make sure you call or write us so we can send you an entry form, which will come in a copy of the Outdoor Digest magazine. With Christmas around the corner, a lot of people will be shopping for their favorite fishermen. If you want to buy a fishing reel, you'll see a wide range available in the stores with a wide range of prices. Now, this might be a little intimidating to a shopper, but Professor Finns, who does look a little like Santa, by the way, can answer your Christmas shopping questions, such as, I haven't fished since I was a kid. What kind of rod and reel should I buy, or what should I expect to pay?
My experience with tutoring hundreds of fishermen over the year leads me to believe that the most popular type reel is the spin cast for beginners and people just getting back into fishing. They're the most foolproof reel. They seem to last the longest and they don't get dirty as quick. Everything being equal, I think that the Zebco brand works the best. If you're after panfish and small bass and walleyes, I would recommend the Zebco 33, which is about $12 or $14, or you can step up to a Zebco 33L called the Legacy, which has 1 ball bearing. It's an extra $6 or $7, but it lasts a little bit longer and it's a little bit smoother. For those wanting to fish bass, pike, and walleye exclusively, something that might be 5 to 10 pound fish, then I suggest going to the Zebco 1, which has a 14-pound line, ball bearings, and is really a smooth and powerful reel.
At this time of year, bells are a common sound, and they are during hunting season too, because many hunters put a bell on the collar of their hunting dog. Now, some hunters use electronic beepers though. I mean, these are battery operated. They emit one sound when the dog is moving, and another sound when the dog stops, indicating hopefully that it's on point. Dog trainer Mark Raymond is often asked, what are the pros and cons of an electronic beeper on a pointing dog as opposed to a bell?
I prefer the beeper collar over the bell. I like to have control of the dog, trained for a true hunting companion. In order to know that dog hears me when I say come, I can't discipline him unless I know he's heard me and intentionally disobeyed. With that bell right below the ears, as he's running, you just hear ta-ding, da-ding, 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 da-ding. He's 80 yards away from you. You're calling him. Your voice is coming from 80 yards away. Meanwhile, that bell's right here going ding, da-ding, da-ding. You can't say he heard you. You don't know that. But with the beeper collar, you have, on the average, about 7 seconds between your tones. Unless they go on point, then you've got 2 tones every second. They do vary some, but you'll have just a beep and then a long pause. They go on point, you got beep beep and a pause for a second. So you've got time in between there to communicate with your dog. And that, what I feel, is the biggest difference between the two, and why I like the beeper collar, because I know the dog has time in between there to hear what I have to say to him.
Look in our Outdoor Digest magazine here. We have pictures of some of the fish that are taken in October. That muskie up there in the upper left, that is a Lake St. Clair muskie. A lot of information in this magazine. A lot of places to go, things to do. Get outdoors if you can this weekend. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about keeping this show on the air.